Making fun of the Imperium is like breathing at this point. It just comes naturally to me. I mean, how could I not? I'm a card-carrying Eldar fan, it's what I do. Whether or not the criticism I have is valid is irrelevant, it's in my blood. But sometimes it's best to just lay all your cards on the table. So here's me being honest. I think the Imperium is pretty great. Not in an in-universe sense, of course, it's abominable. But out of universe, the Imperium goes hard. You know, it's true, fellow Xeno fans, let's be honest, the Imperium is what gets people into 40k. The faith of everyone in it, the gothic feel to everything, how unbelievably horrible it is, but in a cool way. It's interesting and appealing in just about every way you could want a wargame faction to be, and for all my ceases complaining about it, I figured it's only fair to finally say something nice about it. A nice, relaxed video about everything great about the Imperium. Its backwards technology, its backwards attitudes, its backwards ideas. All of the things about it in real life are horrendous and evil, but in the world of things that aren't real, the Imperium is nothing but banger after banger. In old lore it went hard, in new lore it still goes hard, and it just keeps going on and bringing people in to spend thousands on plastic. Let's go through some of those things that make it just great. And while the Imperium is pretty awesome, you know what else is awesome? Knowledge. And you know where you can get knowledge? Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant is the best way to learn math, data, and computer science. How is this the case, you may ask? Through the thousands of interactive lessons available now and the new ones added every month. Lessons, might I add, that are fun and engaging to get through. Story time, everyone. I had a course in college where the professor did not once look anyone in the eye. Her gaze was permanently fixed to the same point on the back of the classroom. How engaged do you think I was? The answer was not in the slightest, but with Brilliant, you won't have that problem. All the minigames and graphics keep you interested in what you're learning, which is good because my attention wanders like you wouldn't believe. And since it's all at your own pace, how busy you are isn't going to ruin your coursework. Learn as much or as little as you'd like to. Brilliant is here to help you learn, not hinder. For a first-time course, you can't go wrong with how technology works. If you're going for a career in anything remotely technological, it could help you out, and even if not, it's fun to learn how the stuff we use every day works. And just for a little bit of extra incentive, using my link in the description and pinned comment, you can get the first 30 days of Brilliant free. The first 200 of you can also get 20% off your annual plan. That's http://brilliant.org/PancreasNoWork for both of the above deals. It's never too late to learn, and there's no better way to do it than with Brilliant. Now then, on to talking about the Imperium. I think we should start nice and simple, something everyone can agree the Imperium does well. Variety. Take a brief moment to imagine something in the real world. Could be historical, could be relatively modern. Chances are there's something in the Imperium that matches it. Alternatively, just think of any science fiction trope from the 1980s or earlier, and the Imperium probably has that too. Now, a naysayer might say that means there isn't an original bone in the Imperium's body, and in all fairness, yeah. But there's something I firmly believe that I'd like to share with you all. It doesn't really matter if something's original if it's awesome as hell. Besides, originality isn't something any 40k faction can accuse another of lacking. The key thing about the Imperium's variety is that it is an empty variety, at least not entirely. In some ways, yeah, I think it's fake variety. How many Space Marine chapters are described as being different from the rest because of how valiant, self-sacrificing, or brutal they are? Because if you had $1 for every lore video that opened with the Cockblasters chapter differs from the rest because of their brutality, you'd probably be a millionaire. But on the flip side of that coin, you have stories about Space Marines, you have stories about the Imperial Guard, you have stories about the Mechanicus, Sisters of Battle, the goddamn Adeptus Arbites. All of those things are wholly different, and all of them are something you can read about and enjoy with the Imperium. The variety of stories isn't just with the sub-factions within it either. There's entirely different tones and genres of 40k books to read solely within the Imperium. The most common thing to find is probably bolter porn, which I know a lot of people will dismiss as action slop, but if you're in the mood for a story about human shoot alien with gun, then there's nothing wrong with it. But there's plenty of more nuanced stories as well. I was reading a Rogue Trader anthology a while back, and that's a fun mix of political drama, family drama, and of course action scenes. You want some comedy? Go get yourself a copy of Caiaphas Cain. Want to stick to the Imperial Guard but with a more serious and gritty atmosphere? Gaunt's Ghost has you covered. And hell, the codices themselves have plenty of cool lore and stuff to find within them. You don't even need to get your lore from stories and narratives. The lore can be easily digested through the rulebooks of the games. And you know, for all the fun lore channels like to have, remember that all that sweet lore is in service to a tabletop game. You want an endless horde of models to throw at your enemy? Imperial Guard. Want elite units that pound for pound surpass anything the enemy has to throw at you? Space Marines, or Custodes if you really want the elite of the elite. Want something in between those? Sisters of Battle, which are also great if you're a fan of the Imperium's religious aspects. Alternatively, the Imperial Knights, because sometimes you don't want tactics in your wargame, sometimes you just want to jam a Jaeger down someone's throat. And that is the absolute most bare-bones reasoning for going with any of those armies. Within those armies, you can do all sorts of of mixing and matching to make them completely distinct from the armies of other players, even if you've got the same Imperial subfaction. The Guard can be entirely infantry, if you don't mind spending several $1,000s, or you can double down on armor and artillery. Space Marines can rush into melee, focus on guns, or mix and match as your needs dictate. And just to make sure you really get the point, let's do a little mental exercise real quick. Imagine Warhammer 40k without any of the non-Imperial factions. No Xenos, no Chaos, none of that stuff. 40k as a game would be just fine. There would still be multiple armies with vastly different playstyles to suit all sorts of tastes. As proof, I present to you the Horus Heresy. That game is pretty much entirely based around just Space Marines, and you can still get all sorts of different builds going within it. And all of this is solely from a rules variety. With modeling included, you can do pretty much anything. Because of its heavily fragmented nature, the Imperium has a leg up on other factions in this regard, much as it pains me to say it. Obviously, of course, there's the inspiration thing I was mentioning before, but even beyond that, think of how much you can homebrew with the Imperium. There's always making the classic homebrew Space Marine chapter, but look beyond that. The Imperium has roughly 1 million worlds, though that's really just the best estimate, and the idea that it has reliable information on every single one of those worlds is laughable. The Administratum is ass at what it does. You will not find good records in their halls. So here's an idea for you. Kit bash an army of guardsmen to hell and back with Necron, Tau, and Votann parts. Say they're using the rules for one of those armies, but in the lore of your dudes, they're an Imperial world who retained far more stuff from the Dark Age of Technology than most other worlds did. Alternatively, kit bash your army with bits and pieces from Age of Sigmar or Fantasy. Maybe you can run them as orcs, saying that their abysmal accuracy scores are because they're using vastly inferior tech to the rest of the Imperium, but they are from a primitive warrior world where survival of the fittest is key. There's your homebrew lore reason for why your guardsmen hit like orcs. Or, and bear with me on this next idea because it's really getting out there, run a game of Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar with your Imperial Guard army. Put the Emperor's finest in flak jackets and helmets and have them wield swords, spears, and halberds. There's plenty of worlds in the Imperium that are at Renaissance level tech after all. Who's to say you can't make it work? When it comes to lore and modeling, the only limits you have with what you can run as an Imperial army are your imagination and what pieces you have to hand. And while yeah, that's true with every faction, most others are going to have some sort of theme you can't really get away from. The Eldars are always going to be space elves, the Orcs are always going to be green and brutish. But the Imperium is literally anything you can imagine a person being, giving it far more room for homebrew than most other factions, and I love that about it. Feel like I've been on the rather general subject of variety for a while now, so how about we switch things up a bit? Something else the Imperium does flawlessly are its aesthetics. You know the big one it has. Massive cathedrals on top of things that probably shouldn't have cathedrals on them, like titans. Armor so baroque it looks like it's about to come to life and yell at me to reform the Holy Roman Empire. And gold. So much gold. Enough gold to blind a man if he's in direct sunlight. There's probably people out there who can put it into nice and fancy-sounding academic words to explain why the Imperium's aesthetic is so appealing, but I'm not one of those people, and I'm not about to use big words I barely understand to hit a page count. This is a YouTube video, not my college capstone, so I'll just use stupid words what us normal folk have. It's cool as hell. You've got the Sisters of Battle with their halos and plate mail power armor, Imperial Guard officers who couldn't decide if their dress uniform should look like it's from ancient Rome or the Renaissance, so they ripped off both. And who could forget the Space Marines? They're the face of 40k for a good reason. They're big, their helmets look like scowling faces, and while admittedly I'm predisposed towards Spartans as far as super soldiers go, there's a reason they're the face of 40k. Space Marine armor is some of the most well-designed stuff I've ever seen. From a modeling perspective, from a general design perspective, you just can't beat it. Clip that now if you gotta, because it's gonna be one of the only times you hear me admit that. Every outfit in the Imperium's wardrobe just looks cool, from the most basic to the most outlandish. I gotta admit, I never thought I'd find candles to look badass, but the Imperium proved me wrong on it. Even something simple like the standard guardsmen, while yeah, just ripped straight from Starship Troopers, look pretty great. But back to the Space Marines real quick, because oh my lord, the Dark Angels. I understand a lot of people think Custodies are the peak of Imperium aesthetics. I really do. They're all gold and the most outlandishly designed armor you've ever seen, perfect for 40k. But dude, just look at the Dark Angels. I cannot get over the power armor and robes, man. Solely based off their aesthetic, they're the best Space Marines, and it's not even close. Come on now, you know there's no competition. And the funny thing is, it's not exactly a complicated design choice. Put robes on a dude in power armor, that's it. That's something pretty great about Warhammer overall, though, to be fair. A whole ton of its concepts are just X with Y attached, and yet it still looks great. That's not to say they only have cathedral-looking stuff. The Mechanicus is a part of the Imperium, technically kinda sorta, and their aesthetic's my favorite. Wires and diodes all come together in a way that looks both incredibly advanced and like something I could do in my garage at the same time. Or fellas like Catacan. Yeah, they're just Rambo. Yeah, they're not original in the slightest, but who cares? They look awesome, and that's as much thought as I care to put into the matter. Awesome in concept anyways. GW update Catachan, please. This man is melting before my eyes. Moving on from the highly critical analysis of their stuff look good, I have to admit something that outside of the context of 40k doesn't make me look good. Which is why I will preface that this is all within the context of 40k. I love xenophobia. I love blind faith. I love it when the government kills billions of its own citizens, and I love it when the concept of hate is the core of a civilization. Because you know what? None of this is real. There's the takeaway of this video, both for those of you who defend the Imperium because you think its ideology is something to aspire to, and to those of you who hate Imperium fans because you assume everyone who likes the Imperium goose steps down the street. It's not real. And in the context of it both not being real and all being in service of toys, it's metal as hell. I've complained about Captain Artemis of the Death Watch simply responding with yes when asked if he would allow his entire civilization to be doomed just to spite the Eldar. That, I think, is very stupid given what was happening in that situation. But in just about every other scenario, that attitude is pure gold. Like when a Tau Watercast ambassador was talking to an Ultramarine, going all, ooh, you wouldn't hurt a defenseless woman, would you? What would your forefathers think? And then Cato Sicarius just comes barreling in, says yes, and puts his foot through her chest. That is hardcore right there. Also incredibly funny. Is that something to aspire to if we ever meet aliens in real life? I'm gonna take a bold stance here and say, no, we shouldn't dropkick aliens to death. But the Tau aren't real. None of the factions are. So when some Imperial Guard commander gives a 5-hour-long speech about how he's gonna grind every Eldar in their craft world to dust, it's awesome. Why shouldn't he? This is a universe where how much gold you have on you determines how safe you are from demons. Why are you trying to take it seriously? I'm not justifying the Imperium from an in-universe perspective. Again, Eldar fan here, and more to the point, someone who can read GW's official statements on if the Imperium is evil or not. I think everything they do is incredibly moronic at best, and downright evil at worst. But come on now, fellas. Space Alexander the Great's conquering the galaxy in the name of the dead god he worships, and anything who gets in his way is automatically a bad guy by virtue of getting in his way. I'm not here for complex debates on morality. I'm here to watch the Minotaurs bulldoze an orphanage because they need to make room for a cathedral to house all the cool stuff they stole. Suffer not the heretic to live. That line could give someone food poisoning because it's raw as hell. It's a fun headspace to put yourself into, assuming again you have the processing power to go, none of these people are real and I'm playing with very expensive action figures. It's why my favorite 40k games are things like Dawn of War and Space Marine. You don't get paragraph after paragraph about whether or not the Imperium is evil, and if the Emperor is loving or not, or if blah blah blah, my name is Lorgar, and blah blah blah, the true salvation of humanity lies with 4 versions of Satan. You get a space crusader screaming in the face of aliens he hates for being different, and those aliens are returning the favor. It's goofy, it's fun, and it's the Imperial guarantee. And if nothing else, rooting for the bad guys is a lot easier in a setting where everyone is the bad guy. But having said that, the fact you can take the Imperium novel seriously too can also be fun. I mean, I'll freely admit that I don't enjoy taking 40k too seriously, and I'll happily make fun of things like the Horus Heresy for it. But here's an olive branch for me to you if you do like to try and take Imperium novels seriously. Take the Horus Heresy. Remove any idea of it being part of a pre-existing setting. Just pretend it exists in a vacuum. No one can pump out 60+ books about a setting if all of them are bad, not even GW. They've cut book series before for being horrible, just ask Yanari fans, so clearly taking the Imperium seriously can end up with some worthwhile stuff, which is neat. There's room for goofballs like me and those of you who genuinely take things like the Primarch seriously. Not that I'm ever going to stop poking fun at it, but hey, you don't have to take what I say seriously. Moving on from a subject that'll get angry Twitter notifications, I want to talk about something a bit more nebulous. Potential. The Imperium has more potential than anyone else in the setting for what you can do with them narratively. Again, Eldar fan here. As much as it pains me to say it, there's really only 3 major routes I can see them going down. They can continue to barely hold on to existence across the craft worlds and maiden worlds, they can somehow get a miraculous resurgence of their empire, or they can finally all die. They're cool narratives, and the specifics can have thousands of different routes to be taken, but that's what I think the overall options are. The Imperium, though? Tons of different routes to take. Personally, I'm a big fan of the theme of decay in 40k as far as the Imperium goes, so I think it'd be cool if it just shattered into thousands of mini-empires. Everyone hates each other, the Xenos are taking the chance to rise up, fun times all around. but that's hardly the only option. You could officially split it into two empires with a great rift, having the side with the Astronomicon being like the Eastern Roman Empire, and the side without it, the Western Roman Empire. It could have a full-on resurgence, which while I wouldn't find that particularly satisfying, that's just me. Or what I'm actually coming around to is completing the comparison to Warhammer Fantasy's Empire of Man, and officially making it the Holy Roman Empire in space. Have all these technically independent nation-states forming a greater whole against outside threats, but constantly squabbling amongst each other for greater power. The state that holds Terra can be like Austria, Macra can be Bohemia, or whichever HRE states you find the coolest, I guess. Specifics don't matter, because this isn't a scenario video, I just think it's awesome how many differing routes the Imperium can narratively take. Hell, you really want to get out there? Have the High Lords and Guilliman declare that the Emperor, in his newfound divinity, is no longer the Emperor. He's moved on from the mortal coil, and thus someone who remains behind will take the position. You can fit that into any of these scenarios. Imagine High Lords and the returning Primarchs all vying for the seat of Emperor. You can bring back the arguments of the Horus Heresy about mankind being ruled by either demigods or normal people, and combine that with any of the above scenarios for extra fun. If the Imperium stays together, returning Loyalist Primarchs can argue that them returning means they should once again be in charge, while Imperial nobles argue that it was the average man who held things together for thousands of years and that shouldn't change. Kinda what happened when Guilliman had to face that little High Lord's coup, but you could go further with it. If it splits in two, you could have the Primarchs rule one half while the regular man rules the other, and if it shatters into pieces, it's a free-for-all. Some states band together under the children of their god, while others take the chance to finally free themselves of imperial rule and all this emperor nonsense. I'm fully aware that the likelihood of any one of these happening is incredibly low, but my point is again, there's so much potential in the Imperium's narrative for cool things like that to happen. The only other faction I think truly rivals the Imperium in this department is the Tau, the newcomers on the block who can expand in any number of ways and whose destiny is anything but set in stone. I just don't think they're quite there yet. They've still got a lot of empire growing to do in my eyes before they can do anything truly out there. But I'm also happy to be proven wrong in that department. And to cap us off, one final note to end on, the last thing I love about the Imperium of Man, ripping on it. Because you know what? It's fun to make fun of the Imperium. Making fun of it for being inefficient, for being every single horrible ideology in history and the new ones we haven't invented combined into one, for being so unbelievably stupid in every single aspect you can think of that it loops back around to being cool. It's endless material. And I say this in a completely loving way. Honest to God, Emperor. I've heard it said before that you don't criticize something you hate, or at least not as intensely as I feel like I do sometimes. I love the Imperium, and I love ragging on it. Yeah, there's things that in my head I would change about it, but that's just in my head. I don't trust anything that comes out of my head, and neither should you. It's just fun to make fun of it. Because you know what making fun of the Imperium and other factions gets you? Some fun nerd arguments online. And those go two ways, both of them good. Either I have a fun conversation, or someone tells me to kill myself, which is the highest honor I can receive. It's the kind of making fun of I wish people would celebrate more. Not one born out of malice, but out of enjoyment. I want more of this kind of stuff. I tell you your failing Imperium will fall at the hands of my Wraith Guard, you tell me you'll kill him a second time, and we have fun playing a game of Warhammer. And of course there's more reasons, but those are my main reasons for why the Imperium is awesome. It's a horrible dystopian nightmare of a civilization that anyone who says they want to live in it or aspire to it is a goddamn fool. It's evil, it chews through people like popcorn, brutal in every sense of the word, and I love it. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, propagated in part by an empire that doesn't even understand why it's fighting anymore or why it's so wrong. And when it comes to tabletop war games, it's the gold standard. You may be an Eldar fan like me, the greatest good, staunchest supporter, or a die-hard Necron supremacist, but deep down in our heart, we all know which faction got us into this hobby. Thank you, as always, to my wonderful channel members. You are the Forge World worker to my Imperium, letting me continue on another day when I really shouldn't. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching, and take care out there. For real though, someone just cracked the Imperium apart, just a little teensy tiny bit. Come on, you can use it to expand the Imperial Guard range. The Mordian Empire, the Vestroyan Kingdom, the Katakan Republic. I assume Katakan would be a republic. It's just that instead of voting people into office to represent them politically, they vote people into office to represent them politically based on their kill count. President Marbo would have my vote, I'll tell you that much.